In late 2018, Logan Paul and Mike Malak unleashed Impulsive, a podcast that quickly became a cornerstone of digital entertainment. Crafted to explore the raw, unscripted depths of conversation with a diverse lineup of guests, it harnessed Logan's vast YouTube empire and Mike's sharp wit to carve out a niche of its own. As the episodes rolled out, Impulsive morphed into a thrilling blend of humor and controversy, piercing through the surface of personal and societal taboos. Little did they know, the chemistry that made their platform so compelling was also brewing a storm behind the scenes, setting the stage for conflicts that would challenge the very fabric of their creation. Initially, the chemistry between Logan and Mike was palpable and became a foundational element of the show's success. Their personalities not only complemented each other, but also helped sculpt a unique brand of entertainment that attracted millions of listeners worldwide. However, maintaining a stable third host proved to be a challenging endeavor for the duo. The role of the third host saw a revolving door of personalities, beginning with Spencer Taylor, who departed after the first 150 episodes to pursue a life in Hawaii. He was followed by Mark Donner, Logan's childhood friend, whose tenure was cut short due to conflicts arising from differing interests with Mike. It wasn't until George Janko was introduced as the latest co-host that the dynamic once again shifted significantly. George Janko, another friend of Logan's, brought an entirely different energy to the podcast. Known for his emotional openness and comedic timing, George's introduction was meant to add a new layer of depth to the discussions. His devout Christian beliefs and his perspectives as a stand-up comedian were expected to contrast sharply with Logan and Mike's more secular and provocative stances. This contrast aimed to enrich the podcast discussions and appeal to a broader audience. Yet integrating George into the well-established dynamic of Logan and Mike was not without its complications. From the outset, George was perceived as not being on the same professional level as his co-hosts, who had each carved out significant niches within the digital and entertainment spheres. This perception, combined with his physical sitting position on the set, often placed awkwardly to the side, made it challenging for him to engage seamlessly in conversations. George Janko's addition to the Impulsive podcast was marked by anticipation and curiosity. Unlike his predecessors, George was not only a close friend of Logan Paul, but also brought a multifaceted background as a stand-up comedian and social media influencer. His personality was distinctly different from Logan's high-energy charisma and Mike's seasoned conversational tactics. George's personality on the podcast was defined by his emotional transparency and earnestness, which starkly contrasts with Logan and Mike's often ironic and detached demeanor. His open-hearted approach and willingness to discuss his spirituality added a new dimension to the show. George's faith and his discussions about his beliefs provided a counterbalance to the typically secular topics that dominated the podcast. His comedic background was supposed to weave humor seamlessly into discussions. Yet, it often resulted in a mismatch with the established tone set by Logan and Mike. Integrating into the Impulsive setup posed significant challenges for George. The format of the podcast, which thrived on quick exchanges and sharp wit, occasionally clashed with George's more deliberate and emotional style. His position at the table, physically set apart from the main hosts, symbolically and practically made it difficult for him to insert himself into the flow of conversation. This placement not only highlighted his status as an outsider, but also hindered his ability to engage naturally with guests and co-hosts. The rapid-fire nature of the dialogue, a hallmark of Impulsive, often left George struggling to find his timing. His attempts to match the energy of Logan and Mike sometimes came off as forced, leading to awkward interruptions or misplaced comments that disrupted the rhythm of the show. These moments underscored his difficulties in adapting to the podcast's established dynamics and contributed to a perception among viewers that he was the lesser third of the trio. Episode 351 of the Impulsive podcast, featuring comedian Bobby Lee, became a turning point for the show, particularly affecting the dynamics among the hosts. During this episode, Bobby Lee, known for his sharp and often provocative humor, made a series of jokes that unexpectedly stirred tensions. The atmosphere, usually kept light and humorous, shifted as the jokes began to touch on sensitive areas, particularly targeting George. The joke that set off the conflict implied that Mike was cooler than George, a seemingly harmless tease in the context of their discussions. However, Bobby's style, which involved a direct and somewhat piercing humor, magnified the implications of this comparison. As the episode progressed, Bobby continued to playfully target George, who appeared increasingly uncomfortable and less engaged. George's sense of being publicly undermined, especially by a guest, intensified the discomfort. His role as the third host, already marked by a struggle for equal footing with Logan and Mike, was highlighted unfavorably. Bobby's jests, while comedic in intent, underscored George's insecurities about his place on the show and his contribution to its success. George's response to the situation was noticeably tense. As the jokes continued, his attempts to retaliate or defend himself seemed to fall flat, further affecting his confidence. The dynamic among the hosts, typically characterized by a balanced share of spotlight and mutual support, appeared disrupted. The fallout from this episode was immediate and significant. The tension did not merely end with the episode's conclusion, but spilled over into subsequent productions. George's usual lively and engaging demeanor was overshadowed by a more withdrawn and subdued presence. This change was not just noticeable to the audience, but also became a point of contention in later discussions and episodes. George Janko's integration into the Impulsive podcast was fraught with challenges. The established format, which favored quick wit and seamless dialogue, often clashed with George's more deliberate and heartfelt approach. His attempts to inject humor and personal insights sometimes disrupted the flow of conversations, leading to awkward moments on air. This mismatch highlighted George's ongoing struggle to find his place within the team, where his contributions frequently seemed at odds with the expectations set by Logan and Mike. The public and the internal team did not shy away from voicing criticisms about George's performance. Viewers often pointed out his apparent discomfort and the forced nature of his interactions, which contrasted sharply with the more fluid dynamics between Logan and Mike. These criticisms were compounded by the physical setup of the show, which placed George in a less favorable position, both literally and metaphorically, thereby magnifying his struggles to engage effectively with guests and co-hosts. The episode featuring Bobby Lee was a catalyst for escalating tensions within the Impulsive podcast team. George's visible discomfort and the perceived imbalance among the hosts led to strained relationships, particularly between George and the other hosts. As the episodes progressed, it became increasingly evident that the harmony once shared was faltering. The trio's interactions grew more stilted, and the mutual respect and camaraderie that had characterized earlier episodes seemed to diminish. The cumulative impact of these challenges led to George's eventual decision to step away from the main lineup of the podcast. His departure was not just a result of the incident with Bobby Lee, but was also influenced by a series of episodes where the disconnect between him and the other hosts was blatantly apparent. The changes following his exit were significant, with the podcast undergoing adjustments in both format and host dynamics. This shift aimed to recapture the fluidity and engagement that had been impacted by the internal discord. After his departure from Impulsive, George Janko sought to carve out his own space in the podcasting world by launching The George Janko Show. This new venture was an opportunity for George to take control of the content and format, tailoring it to better suit his personality and strengths. The show aimed to blend comedy with heartfelt discussions, reflecting George's unique style. Initially, The George Janko Show received a mixed reception. While George's loyal followers appreciated his return and enjoyed the more personalized content, the show struggled to achieve the same level of widespread popularity as Impulsive. The challenges of establishing a new podcast in a saturated market, coupled with comparisons to his previous role, meant that George had to work hard to find and grow his audience. Regarding his relationship with Logan Paul and Mike Malak, George indicated that there were no hard feelings. He expressed a desire to move forward and focus on his projects rather than dwell on past conflicts. However, it was clear that the relationships had cooled significantly. George's interactions with Logan and Mike became less frequent, and while they were not openly antagonistic, it was evident that the close relationship once shared on Impulsive was no longer as strong. Alright, that's all for this video. Hit that subscribe button for more videos like this.